It is now my great pleasure to introduce Ms. Pat Mulroy. She serves as a senior fellow for climate adaptation and environmental policy for the Brookings Institution, and also as a practitioner in residence for the Saltman Center for Conflict Resolution at the UNLV William S. Boyd School of Law. She also holds a faculty position at the Desert Research Institute. Ms. Mulroy also serves as on the Wynn Resorts Lieutenant Board of Directors. Between 1989 and early 2014, Pat Mulroy served as general manager of both the Las Vegas Valley Water District and the Southern Nevada Water Authority. Ms. Mulroy was a principal architect of the SNWA, helping to guide Southern Nevada through one of the worst droughts in the history of the Colorado River. At UNLV's Boyd School of Law and DRI, Mulroy's focus is on helping communities in water-stressed areas throughout both the American Southwest and the world develop strategies to address increased water resource volatility and identify solutions that balance the needs of stakeholders. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Pat Mulroy.
It's a delight to be back in the grand state of Colorado. I've spent lots of my professional life up in this state, arguing with my friends in the Upper Basin, and it's always a pleasure to come back. I have to say, I was rolling with laughter in the back of the room, listening to my good friends on the Colorado River panel. It was like, okay, I'd left the soap opera, and I came back, and nothing had changed. However, there were two historic admissions made on that panel. The first was from Mr. Cullum when he acknowledged the fact that despite the fact that the state of Arizona won Arizona v. California, they lost the war when it came to the CAP and its ultimate subordination to the state of California. That was the first grand admission I have heard on that subject from an Arizonan ever. The second was from Kevin Kelly. There's a recognition that the Salton Sea can't stay 35 miles long, and however many miles wide it is, and that the ultimate consequence is going to be a greatly reduced Salton Sea. So some things have changed and some things have actually progressed in this never-ending saga. Having been immersed in this for 25 years when I left, I've had the great opportunity to really appreciate the compact and the relationship between the states in a very, very different way. As part of my work with the Brookings Institution, I'm on the Global Agenda Council for Water with the World Economic Forum. And when you compare what is going on in the Colorado River Basin compared to other parts of the world, this is the most functional water community anywhere. It is a model. It is looked at by any number of countries and communities and regions. Why does it work? And as I sat there and listened to the Colorado River panel, and I listened to Stan, yes, we have our arguments. But guess what? There is a much greater sense of understanding between the partners than there is virtually anywhere else. And it is something that there are a lot of young lawyers in the room. Some of us are getting up there in age, our bones are creaking, our hair is going gray, and we're handing you a legacy. And that legacy comes with a stewardship responsibility to continue this partnership. And that is the key ingredient as we look at what stresses are going to come upon this compact over the next 20 to 30 years. Those of you who've known me for some time will also take great amusement in the fact that here at the end of the month, I am going to be speaking at an agricultural conference in Nebraska on water for food. Now, having been the chief cheerleader for, or as my good friend Lloyd Allen called me, the chief chick, for the urbanites in their never-ending war against the agricultural community, I've learned a lot of lessons over those 25 years and have changed my perspective dramatically. You know, we always talk about we're exporting food. Yes, we are. We are one of the world's food exporters. The World Economic Forum says that by the year 2030, food production around the world has to increase by 50 to 60%. The populations in the countries like Saudi Arabia that are looking to import more of our agricultural product is because they have a population inverse of ours. They have one where 75 to 80% of the population is 18 years or younger, as opposed to our aging population in Europe and in the Americas, in the United States and Canada. It's a very different world. But keeping the populations fed and exporting, whether it be into China or whether it be into the Middle East or wherever, South America, wherever that food product goes, we are part of an interwoven, intricate food economy for the planet. Now, on the flip side, every cell phone battery is 1,400 gallons of water to produce. We are importing under great stress, Chinese water resources in great volumes. Producing a lithium battery, producing these high-tech toys that we've all become addicted to and that we can't imagine life without anymore, have an enormous water footprint. The Tesla plant that is opening up in northern Nevada will use as much water as all of Carson City. These manufacturing plants, these technology companies, as they produce these high-tech, futuristic things that are going to make us be able to survive in a world with 9.5 billion people, 5 billion of which will live in cities, come with an enormous water footprint. Here in our own country, the water community across the U.S. is really in a state of crisis, if you will. I think water has long been on the back burner. And there are two issues that are pushing the subject of water and will find its way into Colorado River discussions in some set or subset thereof, if they haven't already in the not too distant future. One was Flint, Michigan. We can't imagine Flint, Michigan here in the Colorado River Basin. But what did it really do? It wasn't that they made a mistake, it's that they didn't say anything. And what it did is it eroded the trust. There is an inherent trust in the American to its water provider. We as a culture, we trust our water utilities. That trust was dramatically eroded. And that lack of trust is going to find itself back into urban conversations, even in our basin. And it's going to affect the way we can manage water resources in this basin. The other one is dying infrastructure across the country. And how do we replace $1 trillion plus, 2 trillion, 3 trillion. I've heard all kinds of numbers thrown around that affect our ability to conserve, that affect our ability to manage, that affect our ability in the urban world and in many rural communities to move water around. We have some of the newer infrastructure here in the western United States, but the effect of it will invariably hit our tax burden, it will hit our pocketbooks. It's an issue that is going to take the subject of water and lift it up into a larger national dialogue. And when that happens, everyone will become the resident critic. There are a couple of other things that are going to really put pressure on the compact, and especially the interplay between the compact and laws that we enacted in the 70s that have done their job, but now some of us are beginning to question whether they are flexible and adaptable enough to meet the needs of a changing climate and a changing world. It would be probably considered heresy in many corners, but when you look at the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, and the Endangered Species Act, things have got to change. Now, whether they are in the administration of those acts or whether they are embedded in the laws of those acts really doesn't make a difference. It's time to look at how flexible are they. I had the opportunity to be in Sacramento 2 days ago and speak to the Water Education Foundation for an Ann Schneider fundraiser up there. And all you have to do is look at the success of the Habitat Conservation Plan in the lower basin and the species programs in the upper basin and the failures in the Bay Delta. And for this basin, there is no greater challenge than fixing the problem of the California Bay Delta. What happens to that delta is going to affect every citizen in the Colorado River Basin. You can't cut the water supply to 20 million people in half and force it to go to its only other source of supply without straining that other source of supply to the breaking point. We need the California Bay Delta fixed. And what is the ostensible reason why those pumps are shut down? Supposedly to help the fish. Well, the emperor has no clothes, because all those turned off pumps haven't saved a single fish. And there is a great resistance to dealing with the real issues, doing the real habitat rebuilding up in that area, putting the 21st century facilities in that will allow water to come to Southern California, continuing to supply water where it is critically needed in the fashion without which it cannot survive. It's because they don't want to find a solution. It's because it's the just say no syndrome. Now you take the just say no syndrome and you overlay it on any one of those issues. The Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Endangered Species Act. And they will brittle and they will crumble, because the strains on those acts will not be able to survive it. The greatest strength we in this basin have is that compact, which has created a culture of cooperation and a culture of partnership, which has allowed the Colorado River community to do things that other areas, particularly the Bay Delta, seem to be unable to accomplish. There was a guiding principle that continues to weave its way through our discussions on the river, which is failure's not an option. Not every corner has come to that realization. Protecting that relationship and that partnership that that compact has created, as it starts conflicting with the Clean Water Act and conflicting with the Endangered Species Act and conflicting with the Safe Drinking Water Act as the reservoirs shrink and the water quality diminishes, is going to be all important. That willingness to find solutions in the face of daunting challenges is going to be the only thing that gets this portion of the country through it. Because we are an artificial watershed, and I know those who have been around this river know it very well. Sitting here in Denver, we are drinking Colorado River water, which is emanating from the other side of the Continental Divide. Go to Salt Lake, the Wasatch Front, you will be drinking Colorado River water. We just listened to Stan talk about the next generation of plumbing projects that the Navajo Nation desperately needs. We understand interconnections. We understand that what we've created is a huge interconnected community, whether it's Metropolitan's Aqueduct, whether it's the CAP, whether it's the Central Utah Project, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, all these people and all these growers and all these economies and all these environments will not be able to survive unless they find common ground. You know, we live in an era of pretty ugly talk. You can't turn the television on right now without hearing somebody calling somebody by a name and somebody pointing the finger and blaming somebody else for something. It is an environment in which it is very difficult to have rational conversations about anything. I was joking with a New York Times reporter here a couple of days ago about the wall between the United States and Mexico. And I was just wondering how big of a hole we're going to leave for the Colorado River to get through. And is it going to be big enough to deliver only the minimum flow, or is it going to be big enough to deliver a pulse flow? There's some crazy talk going on, and for us to stay grounded and for this community to stay grounded is going to be increasingly difficult. There is no other part of the world that I have found where the things that you have accomplished are even possibly thought about. Think about what last year was all about. In a year where Lake Mead was dropping to its lowest level ever, and where we were fretting that we were going to go into shortages, we had cut a deal under which Metropolitan, with nowhere else to go, had to take almost all of its water out of storage in Lake Mead, driving it down even further. None of us screamed. And we had cut a deal with Mexico, where that was the year that we were going to release extra water for the Delta in Mexico. Now think about that. I can't imagine 30 years ago that we wouldn't have all reneged on all the commitments that we had made. But we stuck to our guns. And the river community kept its promise to Mexico, and it released the pulse flow despite the additional risk that it represented to the system. And it allowed Metropolitan, without a whimper, to take water without which it could not survive. That deal could never have been cut by a judge adjudicating litigation. That had to take everybody being willing to take their share of the responsibility, make their commitment, and bring their strength to the table to make all those pieces fit. So if we're talking about a climate-changed world where the impossible drought becomes more possible than our worst nightmares would even let us imagine, it will be that resilience that the partnership brings that will get the states through it. It will be that changed conversation from our rights to our responsibilities. Some of us have begun talking about citizens of a basin. We're not individuals. We are citizens of a community, we are citizens of a state, we are citizens of a country, but we are also citizens of a shared water supply of a man-made basin. Not just the natural basin, but the man-made basin. With that responsibility, and its responsibility to its native tribes, to its environment, to keeping the system from crashing, will take an absolute continuation of this journey that we've been traveling since the 90s, of away from litigation and over to partnerships and negotiated agreements. It is not what will the law allow us to stop, because that's easy. Everyone in this room is a good enough lawyer to find a way to stop just about anything. But what will it allow us to do? Where are the flexibilities? Where are the opportunities? I would venture to say that as much attention as we paid to the quantification settlement agreement in California in the 90s, where Jim Lockhead and I spent more time in Sacramento than we did in our own respective state capitals that one year, we will be doing this again when it comes to the Bay Delta. That attitude of just say no, with signs posted and banners waving and finding yet another nuisance lawsuit to bring and another obstacle to throw in the way, will be felt in Denver, and it will be felt in Las Vegas, and it will be felt in Phoenix. It can't be sustained. My favorite quote of the past decade probably is Jerry Brown when he said, "I'm going to get shit done." And he's determined to see this project through. This river community is the most respected river community around the world. I've hosted Pakistanis, I have hosted Iraqis, I have hosted Israelis, you name it, the Chinese, the Vietnamese. Every place there is a shared watershed. What this river community has been able to accomplish is unbelievable to them. That is its strength. The compact was a partnership at its inception. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to parse chapter and verse and what paragraph it's in and what line it is and how that interplays with the state constitutions. I'm not smart enough for that. When I look at the compact, I saw a document that said that Western water law with first in time, first in right cannot work between 7 states. We have to forge a path for 7 partners. 7 equal partners, no matter how big or how small. or whether they actually sat at the table, or as with the case of Nevada, they were drunk under the bar somewhere in Santa Fe. I'm going to say it because if I don't say it, somebody else is going to say it. It is a partnership. And then during the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, into the 80s, everybody jockeyed. How can I become a more preferred partner? How can I get a preference in this partnership? And I think the lesson of Arizona v. California, the lesson of do you really have winners and losers at the end of the day, or do you only have losers sunk in? So during the 90s and for the years of this century, we've been traveling the path back to what caused the compact to be signed in the first place. 7 equal partners, 7 partners who rely on the same watershed, 7 partners who have to find a way to get along. 7 partners who have to find opportunity where others find obstacles. It is invariable that as we're going to go through some ugly drought cycles, this is only the tip of the iceberg of what we've been going through here for the last 16 years. Imagine 5-6 years of deep, deep drought. 2002 was a horrible year for the Upper Basin. Put 6 of those back to back. How do we survive? How do we get through? When those who are in law school today get to be as old as I am, the conversation is going to very much be around how we survived and how it no longer was a conversation of rights, but how it became a conversation of responsibilities. Whether it's the individual user, whether it's the corporate user, whether it's the community, or whether it's the state. Our diversity, our breadth of land mass is our strength. It would never have been conceivable that states and communities are buying water to leave in Lake Mead and in Lake Powell with no one's name on it to protect the system. The Colorado River community needs to celebrate who they are and what they've accomplished. It is the legacy that the next generation of water lawyers is going to be receiving from this generation of combatants. With it comes enormous opportunity and the hopes of communities up and down the Colorado River Basin. Leave this area and go see what it's like in other areas. It is not a pretty picture. This is a story that is being told and needs to be told all around the world. And so, as we take our journey back to being full partners, start thinking about these laws in their flexible fashion, not in their rigid, immovable fashion. And maybe one day the Navajos in the unserved area now will have water supply. And maybe we will see Lake Mead being bolstered up significantly because there has been a different conversation being had between the ag and the urban sector. When there is a drought, we all say, we're having a drought and it's his fault. It is always the other guy's fault because we're virtuous. It is not agriculture's fault. It is not the urban's fault. It is not the state of California's fault. It is not the state of Colorado's fault. It just is. With everyone having their own cultures and their own infrastructure to deal with. Find the opportunities. And for heaven's sakes, stay out of court, because we'll all suck air if we go to court. Failure isn't an option. Thank you.